Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Herbal Prepper Live, where we discuss herbal and natural medicine for emergency preparedness because your health deserves a Plan B. I'm your host, Kat, the Herbal Prepper. My goal is to help you and your family be better prepared for life's emergencies, especially when there are no doctors or pharmacies available. Before I kick off tonight's show, however, I need to satisfy the legal department here with a few quick disclaimers. I am not a doctor. I do not prescribe or practice medicine. I do not diagnose, treat, or claim to cure any disease or illness. If you need medical advice or treatment, please seek out a licensed physician. All listeners are strongly encouraged to learn and research the safety and efficacy of herbal remedies for themselves and to develop their own opinions. The topics discussed are hypothetical and provided for informational purposes only. Use at your own risk and with a heavy dose of common sense. With that said, Herbal Prepper Live is one herbalist's opinion on alternatives to modern medicine during a total collapse of our way of life. In this hypothetical scenario, there are no doctors, no EMTs, no hospitals, and no pharmacies. Professional medical help is simply not an option. If you or your loved ones need health care, the buck stops with you. So I ask you, if we were faced with the end of the world as we know it tomorrow, such as an economic collapse, an EMP or other attack on our electrical grid, civil unrest, martial law, the suspension of the Constitution, the zombie apocalypse itself, could you care for your and your loved one's health care needs? If you answered no and you'd like to change that, please keep listening because this show is for you. All right, so with that out of the way, welcome everyone back to another episode of Herbal Prepper Live. Our show airs live every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific. And today is Sunday, January 7th, 2018. Welcome everyone who's tuning in live this evening, everyone who is in the chat room, and to all those folks who are going to be listening to the download later. This is the first episode of the new year, so I hope that you all had a very happy holiday season with your loved ones. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight because I really have missed you guys. I've missed this. It is nice to get back into the swing of things. I got to tell you, we had sort of a wild winter break over here. If you've seen the news, you know the flu outbreak that's 37 different states. So let's just say it's all over the U.S. So that hit our house because, of course, it's going to. And but thankfully, we were over it a little quicker than I think the bulk of people. So we got it and we were down, and that didn't make for the best of holidays. And trying to, we ended up postponing getting together with family and such. We were over it quickly, and then we got, when I say quickly for a flu, it's not like a lot of times that can go on for a couple weeks, but. We were over it and got hit with, everyone's seen this in the news, the bombogenesis. I have lived in New England all my life without ever hearing the word bombogenesis or bomb cyclone or polar vortex. We had it all over the past couple of days. They had this bomb cyclone blizzard that was followed by a polar vortex leading to this snowmageddon in 2018. It was bitterly cold, and we had really an unusual amount of snowfall for my area of the state, which is along the coast when the coastal waters usually keeps us a little warmer. So we had this sort of bizarre snowfall. Internet signal was a little intermittent at best there, but we spent plenty of time playing games with the kids and watching a few movies here. So we made it through. And is it a little choppy? Because there was I did have internet problems during the storm. It seemed to be better today. It doesn't settle. Let me know. I got my phone ready to go, and I'll call right in. Usually the sound is better. The sound quality is better when I dial in through the computer. So anyway, this week we are doing another audience requested show. I've been doing a series of chronic illnesses and preparing for them a lot of the concern being raised due to the escalation in words going back and forth and tensions due to North Korea's most recent ICBM launch, because now they can reach out and touch us. And there's been renewed interest in not only nuclear attack, the CDC is telling people to prepare for that, but also, in EMP, which would probably be easier, if they don't blow themselves up first. Did you see the article where they set up a missile and went down in one of their own cities? I'm like, that's, I gotta kind of laugh. You got to find humor in this somewhere. I mean, it's not funny, but it's funny. So, yeah, exactly. Anyway, if you're missing the chat room here, you're missing this. You should join it. You should join the chat room if you can. There's a funny conversation going on. So anyway, this is sort of renewed concerns here, about these kinds of attacks. And so, what would we do if something like that happened? Shipping is crippled, and pharmacies aren't going to get a resupply of medications because they're on the same kind of just-in-time inventory that grocery stores are in. We all look at those pictures of grocery store shelves being bare. That's what we think of. When we think of there being an SHTF situation, that there's going to be no food on the shelves. As we see the grocery stores, there's no water, no bottled water anywhere either. But the pharmacies are just as vulnerable, and so there are a number of chronic illnesses, and of course there's other things too, other medications there too, antibiotics that are very, very necessary, pain medications that, people will fight for. Addicts will do anything to get, their next fix. And there are a lot of people, we know that there is, we have a very big problem in the U.S. with certain types of painkillers, prescription painkillers. And I don't want to be anywhere near a pharmacy if things were to go bad. So it doesn't have to be so dramatic. I mean, someone could lose their job. And I know the economy is doing better right now. Economies are, cyclical. They go up, they go down. And you never know when, even in a down economy, some people are doing well, other people not so well. You don't, it's what comes around goes around. So, this is why we prep. So, just to have a backup plan. You never know. It could be something like the show that I did a while back. It wasn't that long ago on cyber attacks when the shipping giant Maersk, that Danish company, they got those these big ships. They go across the oceans with those the shipping containers on them. There was a ransomware attack in Ukraine, and it affected Maersk, and it shut them down for 2 weeks. If that had gone on for any great length of time, I mean, the interruptions were more of an inconvenience, and a lot of people probably didn't even notice it because it was just 2 weeks. Had that gone on, though, I mean, they're responsible for more global shipping than like any of the other of those container shipping companies. We would have noticed, and it would have been really rough. So, anything like that can interrupt supply, because a lot of our pharmaceuticals do come from overseas, this would have been a really big problem. So we need to start thinking about some backup plans. And asthma is one of those cases where you really need to have a backup plan because you cannot cure asthma. You can only manage it. And the medications are, these are things people are dependent upon. They're not cheap, that's for sure. And you need to have a strategy in place to take care of, either your asthma, or it might be someone else's that's either in your family or in your group, or, if you are that type that is looking to work with your local community, if you are looking to be an herbalist and barter your skills with someone else, then, it's very important for you to know what to do if you have someone with asthma that's looking to you for some kind of a help. This is something that I think all of us should be aware of what to do. I mean, even if you don't know anyone right now, maybe there's nobody in your family who has asthma, and there's nobody in your little circle of people that you're prepping with, assuming that you're prepping with others. Maybe none of your neighbors do, but you don't know how things are going to progress in time. You might end up with one of your kids, they get married, they have kids, they may end up, they could have a kid with asthma. So these things happen. People aren't going to stop having families just because the apocalypse happens. That's not what people do. Families are going to go on. You don't know someone who you may align yourself with. Someone in their group may have asthma, or any of the other various situations that we've been discussing and that we will continue to discuss. So that's why we're looking at it. It's really important for you to have some knowledge about this and a backup plan for it. And for those who are listening live, I want to remind you, if you have something you want to share, if you have a nagging question, please join the chat room here at prepperbroadcasting.com. Type your question in there, or better yet, please take advantage of this being a live broadcast. Call into the show. The phone number to do so is 347-202-0228. And again, just in case you missed that, that is 347-202-0228. And once the call is answered, you hear the little message being played to you. Hit 1 so that we know that you are waiting for us to answer the phone. All right, so just a few little bits of housekeeping to get out of the way. If you're listening over at Blog Talk, come on over, join us here at Prepper Broadcasting. Lots of nice people in the chat room tonight. Lots of conversation going on here, as there always is. So, come on over here, put your questions in there, and, while you're here, please make sure that you check all of the other shows that are here, all of the other hosts' pages. Look at all their archived episodes, tons of information here. For those who don't know, I am the author of 2 books that you will want to have in your Prepper library. That is Prepper's Natural Medicine, which is kind of like a crash course in herbalism, and it's going to cover like core herbal skills, therapeutic properties of a little over 50 different herbs, and herbal formulas that you can use to get you prepared for both acute and chronic conditions, when there is no other form of healthcare available to you. And the other book, my second book, Prepping for a Pandemic, is loaded with critical information that you really do need to have. Disease will follow a disaster. A pandemic can be the disaster, or it can follow a disaster. And there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from this recent Ebola outbreak in 2014, and how we can apply what we observed, going on between governments, people, medical personnel, and so on. And we can use this to protect ourselves from future deadly epidemics and pandemics, because if history has taught us anything, pandemics will continue to happen. We just don't know when or where they'll pop up. Plus, I give you a whole bunch more interesting info in there, like my top picks for the next great pandemic and so on and so forth. So please go check them out. They are in the Prepper Broadcasting Bookshop. You can check that out, and you can also find them at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere books are sold. If you have a local bookstore, please, they could use your support. And check out the library. They may have a copy there. And if they don't, please consider donating a copy there. I'm sure that they could use it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take the first of 2 breaks here. And when we come back, we're going to start talking about conventional and herbal options that you have when with asthma. All right, so we're back. I was trying to sign in to Skype in the meantime, and it's giving me a problem. So I'm going to have to play with that a little bit later. I've been looking here in the chat room. In the meantime, there's a lovely conversation going on in here. There have been, if I'm just going to sum this up here for those who are going to be listening to this recorded later on. There has been a number of drug shortages. And obviously there's no, shipping delays. So, going on right now. But yeah, there have been a number of Tamiflu and some other flu medications. There's also been shortages in saline. if you can imagine. It just, we've been short on saline for a long time now. Oh, let's see. Yep, it's important to strengthen that immune system. Very, very important there. Elderberry syrup, we were talking about the flu earlier. That's very important. It's my go-to when there's a flu, which is why I think when we got this flu that came around, we weren't really hit so badly as some other people were. Let's see. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on here. So here's a question from that room. These respiratory herbs be helpful for COPD? Yes, but if you can, I'd strongly recommend that you find an herbalist that's local to you and work with them. So having that local experienced person to go to is always very helpful. So, or you can, of course, you can study more about herbs and so on, which I encourage everyone to do. But yes, in general, they are helpful for that. Things like bronchitis and so on, anywhere where there's that restriction of airflow and coughing and wheezing and so on. And Benadryl and yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about those kinds of things in a moment. And let's see what else is in here in the chat room. Let's see. Oh my gosh. Antibiotic resistance. Let's see. Oh, geez, your herbalist retired. Well, maybe that's a spot role that you might want to step into. Then that might be an opportunity there for you. All right. So, you got Stephen Buhner's Herbal Antibiotics book. Yeah, that's definitely it's a game changer. All right. So let's see here. Starting out with some basic information about asthma. Obviously, if you were listening to the show because you have asthma and you saw the title of the show, of course, you know a lot of this already. So for people who don't, though, they need to know this because again, they may end up with someone with asthma in their group, or having to help someone with asthma. So just so that we're all on the same page. Asthma is an obstructive lung disease. We don't know what causes it. We don't know how to cure it. We do, thankfully, know how to manage it. And that's really important because, it constricts the airways. It makes it hard to breathe. And, we kind of need to do that. Breathing is kind of important. I've become very accustomed to doing so. I don't know anyone who hasn't. We all like to breathe. And, asthma can, you can have minor symptoms and it can also be life-threatening. So, word about symptoms, it is really important that if you have access to, modern medical facilities, a physician, if you have access to modern diagnostics, that you avail yourself to them and that you get a proper diagnosis from a licensed physician. Because, sometimes symptoms will show up, in very young children, and sometimes they show up much later in life, on the other end of the spectrum. But symptoms can be similar to some of those that are found in other serious conditions. So if you just assume that they're asthma, you might be masking, another problem and doing yourself a disservice. So make sure that, if you suspect asthma, that you get a proper diagnosis if that's possible. We have that available to us now, so use it now. Obviously, post-disaster, some Hollywood-esque, long-term scenario, that, you're going to have to make, your best judgment, without access to that. But we have it now, so please avail yourself to that. So anyway, that being said, when when asthma symptoms are flaring up, they become inflamed and they constrict and they become narrow, and often there's excess phlegm. There'll be coughing, wheezing. It's very difficult to catch one's breath, to get enough oxygen, to get enough air into the lungs. There's often a pressure, a weight, or a tightness on the chest. during an asthma attack, the body is taking in less oxygen, and it doesn't it builds up, and you can monitor yourself somewhat with a couple of instruments that you can pick up now, and they're not that expensive. You can go over to Amazon and pick yourself up a very small little portable pulse oximeter, and that is going to measure the oxygen in your blood. And you can also pick up yourself a peak flow meter. They get several different versions there, and there's one that doesn't require any electricity. So I would suggest you get that because that's more resilient. And what a peak flow meter will do is it will compare. It measures how well your air is moving out of your lungs, and you breathe into it, and the reading is compared to other reading that you took earlier that represents your more ideal measurement. So you have something to compare it to. So this is a way that you can monitor, how the oxygen in your blood and the airflow, from day to day, week to week, and so on, to keep just kind of keep an eye on this before you even start to feel anything. There are a few situations that can bring on an asthma attack, or they can make symptoms worse. And the first, I think, a number of us may recall, if you had anyone with asthma in school, when, at least from my generation anyway, is just exercise-induced asthma attacks. And it's worse in cold, dry air like we have right now in winter. And one of the things, though, is that this is not to say, okay, don't exercise, don't exert yourself. That's not the correct response. You can actually improve your asthma somewhat by staying fit, by exercising. You can, and just like anybody else, can improve their lung capacity. So, you can definitely improve it somewhat by staying fit. However, be aware that if it does happen to be cold and the air does happen to be dry, it may not be the best day in the world to go run a 5K. So just keep that in mind. The second scenario is occupational asthma, which is triggered, you go to work and there's some exposure to chemical irritants that are in the air in the workplace. One of those reasons why we're told now not to be wearing perfume when we go to work. So, but of course, there are industrial chemicals and so on that can certainly irritate someone's asthma symptoms and trigger an attack. And a third scenario is allergy-induced asthma. And, this happens, obviously, there's an airborne irritant like pet dander, mold, pollen, something like that, that's in the air, it's breathed in. And what on earth is going on in the chat room? Oh, my God. Yes. Herbalists did get accused of all sorts of mystical, magical nonsense because we were helping out here, and but anyway, I'm going to leave that for another day. No, that's a story for another time. But you guys have fun there with that. Anyway, so allergy-induced asthma, if this is what triggers your asthma, then obviously avoiding those things is helpful. It's not always possible, but there are ways of mitigating that as well, at least making it less severe. Let's see. All right, so again, there's no way to cure asthma, but we focus on managing symptoms. And this is usually done in a two-pronged approach with, first you address, you have medication, prescriptions that address acute asthma attacks. Those are the rescue inhalers that you see. And second, there are medications that people take to reduce the frequency of symptoms. And, that's effective. And, obviously, if you're taking prescriptions for this, please continue to do so. I'm not advocating at all that anybody stop taking their medicine. Please, continue to do so. At the same time, if you are interested in looking at herbal alternatives as a backup plan for some emergency that cuts you off from your supply of medications, it's not a smart idea to just say, okay, I'm going to pick an herb and I'm going to stock up on it. I'm never going to try it. I'm never going to test it out. I'm not going to get familiar with it at all. I'm going to do nothing with this. And then, if, there's, an EMP, in 15 years from now, I'm already, that's not the way to go. One, herbs are not going to keep well for 15 years like that. You wouldn't take, you really shouldn't be relying on something you've never tried, like any other piece of gear, any other equipment, like when you get a brand new tent, what do? You open it up, and you, okay, so some of you can hear me fine and other people it's breaking up. So if some people can hear me fine, then it's probably not on my end. So anyway, so that's a good thing. Anyway, let's see here. Where was I here? I'm looking through my notes. Yeah, so don't wait until you're in the middle of an emergency to test something. That's my take on it. That's my personal opinion on it. You would not, wait to test out a firearm until you wouldn't just carry it and never do anything with it, and use it the first time in an emergency. That's generally not a good idea. Same thing with any other gear, any other supply. Just with your food storage, you don't want to invest thousands of dollars in food storage to find out you can't stand the company's product. That's not a good idea either. If it were me, if I had it, and if I were trying to prep for myself here, I would probably do some very controlled experiments, get familiar with it, with whatever, because you keep in mind, just like with pharmaceuticals, herbal remedies do not affect each individual exactly the exact same way. Sometimes an herb might work very well for someone, doesn't do anything for somebody else. So if it were me doing this, I would want to experiment, some very cautious experimentation while times were good. Probably if I had a very mild event and I just wanted to, get familiar with things, I would probably do some very cautious experimentation until I built up some experience factors with various herbs, how they were prepared, and it would be preferable to work with an experienced herbalist who is local, that you can, meet face-to-face with and get some guidance, just get familiar with what does and does not work for you as an individual. That would be my approach if it were me. So what options exist? Conventional options. So there are some, if you have the option of ordering your medications through a pharmacy online that allows you to buy 3 months in advance, by all means, buy that 3 months in advance. I mean, why wait, buying only 1 month at a time? You're going to need it. This is one of those things that you can improve asthma to a point depending on, your situation, some people more than others, but you're not going to cure it. You're going to need the meds. Order them ahead of time. There's probably something else that can be cut from the budget to make sure that you get those. And I mean, it would better to have 3 months of a supply than, 30 days of and then on day 31, Kim Jong crazy pants sets off an ICBM and that's, the end of your supply. So if you can do that and order some ahead, all the better. You could also ask your doctor, depending on your doctor, for an extra script for, if you have a really cool doctor, you can tell them I'm preparing and I have to pay out of pocket, but I'd like to get an extra, prescription here so that I can kind of put stuff aside. If you've got a cool doctor like that, great. If not, they still might write you one here and there. If you say you're going to be traveling, emergencies, maybe, you want to have one on hand just in case you're stuck at home because you've got, a bomb, cyclone, blizzard, polar vortex thing happening and you don't want to be stuck, without your medicine. You want to have a backup plan for that. whatever you're going to do there, but plan that you'll be paying out of pocket for that, because most insurance plans won't cover an extra prescription of that. Something else you can do, you can store some over-the-counter asthma medicine. Now, the issue here is that Primatene Mist was taken off the shelves back in 2011, and I think that this was just a very bad move. Some small little mini rant here. The U.S. signed on to the Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer, and Primatene Mist contains CFCs, which was, this was the cause for the hole in the ozone layer. And of course, yes, you need to fix a hole in the ozone layer, obviously. But the protocol phased out the use of CFCs in the countries that signed on to this over time. So this was signed in like the late 1980s or mid 1980s, I can't remember, but it was in the 1980s. And I was a kid then. You can't blame me. I don't recall exactly when this happened. But by 2011, it was time. Primatene Mist was taken off the shelves, not because it wasn't effective, because it was, but it was taken off the shelves because the U.S. signed on to the Montreal Protocol. So the medication was taken off the shelves, and I think that we probably could have had an allowance for medications. I mean, we've been able to find alternatives for things like hairspray and all sorts of other non-essentials, but when it comes to something essential like this, now we can't have that. Oh, well, So it used to be that you used to be able to buy a rescue inhaler in over-the-counter, non-prescription strength, but, it was, Primatene Mist was, this was epinephrine. So it's the same kind of medication that, like an EpiPen is epinephrine when we talk about herbal options. And of course, there's issues with some of that too, but I'll get to that in just a second before I want to get ahead of myself. So, of course, you got your basic meters that I was just talking about, the pulse oximeter, the flow meter, so you can kind of, like you see that, hey, you're not doing too well. Maybe this is not the time to go out and split wood on a really frigid day. It's probably not the smartest plan. So just, kind of keep an eye on that. Try not to trigger it if it's possible. And also, if you have that are triggered by allergies, one thing you can do is stock up on over-the-counter allergy medication, because if that's what triggers your asthma attacks, get yourself your Benadryl. The liquid is faster acting, but it doesn't have as long of a shelf life. So you have to keep that in mind. Oh, wow, that was the cat underneath my desk. I totally did not know she was in here, and that kind of startled me. All righty. That's just what you need. Out of nowhere, the cat's rubbing against your leg, and you didn't know the cat was in the room. All right. Good times. All right. So you can stock up on the over-the-counter allergy medication that you can do. But that's kind of where conventional stuff ends. So you can possibly extend it, stock up a little bit, maybe head off, some attacks here or there, but you may be able to improve it through staying fit. But that's, and I've seen some people advocate for breathing exercises, and if that works, I don't have any personal experience with that one, but if you find breathing exercises that work, by all means do so. I think that thinking about what the theory there is, the mindset of, doing breathing exercises that help to expand, increase lung capacity, it kind of makes sense that would help. Now, when it comes to sort of the natural and the herbal category, a lot of people don't think of this as an herb, but this is plant-based here, and we're looking at caffeine. Caffeine will help when you have airway constriction and that coughing. A hot cup of coffee especially, if you take it right at the very beginning of you start to feel symptoms. Just like hot coffee, if you can take it right at the very beginning of a migraine is another thing. But again, taken at the very beginning of asthma symptoms can help stave off a minor attack. If you're concerned about an EMP, just get yours you make yours in a French press. Then it doesn't require any electricity. You'll just have to have a way to heat it up, and you'll be able to heat your water and make a pot. So you don't have to even be a pot. You can get really small French presses, so you can make it fairly quickly, and then make a larger one afterward or something. But if you take in that caffeine, caffeine can be used as a wonderful medication. I prefer not to drink coffee on a regular basis for a number of reasons, but one of them is so that I can use it effectively as a medicine if I need it for my migraines. But stock on that coffee for that reason. Now, did the sound go? Is it choppy, or did it resolve itself? I'm looking into that chat room. Hopefully, choppy on and off. Let me just. I'm just going to call in because I don't want there to be any. I don't want there to be any delay here. All right, I'm calling in and I'm going to switch over. We'll take a quick break while we make this switch.
All right, so let's see here. We were talking about herbs, herbal alternatives now. So talked about caffeine. That's good. So, if you can't get caffeine from coffee, I wouldn't rely on black tea or green tea. There's not as much caffeine, and personally, in my herbal practice, I haven't seen that work as well. And it might just be something unique to coffee. It might not just be just the one chemical that's in it. But as a backup, I wouldn't turn it down, but I would go for coffees as my go-to as a caffeine source for that. Now, other plants here, lobelia, probably my favorite. It's the first thing that I go to. If I end up someone who comes to me who, is looking for some alternatives, it's one of the first things that I mention. Lobelia inflata, you can make a tincture with this. You're using the aerial parts here. And the one thing about making a tincture, and you can go on my website. I've got instructions for how to make a tincture. I'm not going to cover that now. But in this case, let's say you're going to macerate it. When you make a tincture, it's usually with alcohol. In this case, you want to add a small amount of vinegar to it, or you can just make an herbal vinegar. In order to get the chemicals out of the lobelia that you need for this, because it's the premier antispasmodic. It is just, it is a wonderful antispasmodic, and it's a wonderful expectorant, and it's a wonderful overall relaxant. So, which is, an expectorant, relaxant, antispasmodic, perfect for these kinds of, airway constrictions, okay? But in order to get the chemical out of it, you need an acid. So you can add some apple cider vinegar to your alcohol, a couple of tablespoons in, let's say, a pint worth of alcohol should be sufficient. But you can also just make an herbal vinegar. And then with that, you can then take that. The dosage will be a little different if you had tincture or an herbal vinegar. You have to take more of the herbal vinegar than you would with a tincture. But you'll take a small dose of it, and then give it 15 minutes, and then see how that affects you. If there's no change, take it again, and so on and so forth until the symptoms have abated. I've seen and read lots of cautions about lobelia, the low-dose herb, and don't use it too much, and that's what I had been taught originally. But, I haven't found any proof of it, and then, actually, of proof of it being a risk. And in my own practice, I haven't seen that. And personally, of course, I experiment on myself all the time. So, I've tried it for other kinds of spasms and and also as an expectorant. And I haven't found it to be something that you have to say, oh gosh, no more than like 5 drops or anything like that. Nothing like that. Somewhere between 10, 20 drops. You have to find your own dosage with that. That's just like anything. Someone can say, oh, a standard dose, maybe about 30 drops. And for a lot of herbs, that's fine, a standard dose, somewhere between 30, 40 drops, 3-4 times a day. Lobelia, maybe a little less, and not because there's a caution, but because it's not necessary. It just works really well. Mullein is another one, and I've mentioned this before. Mullein, it's this herb that's got these beautiful soft leaves, and in the first year, all it has are the leaves. It's like if you were to find this out, out in the wild, and you needed to find some wild source of toilet paper, this would be. It's very soft. I had one person say that they found it really prickly and they would never do that. And I'm like, I don't know how the mullein is where you are. Although I do know that one of my first herbal teachers did say that whenever she came to our part of the state, mullein here was different. So maybe that's just my experience, but I find the leaves to be very, very soft. They're like fuzzy and soft. But then again, maybe that's just something unique to my area. But mullein leaves, they can be made into a nice hot tea, and this is going to sound totally wacky and counterintuitive, but it's not when you really think about it. If you smoke the leaves, you actually bring the medicine directly into your lungs. It's the most, granted, smoke in general is not good to breathe in, but we're talking about we're not talking about going into a burning building and breathing in, toxic smoke from, vinyl siding and plastic and all sorts of things. And we're not talking about, we're not talking about getting a habit going of smoking cigarettes or anything like that either. We're talking about something very occasional to handle specific symptoms, and that's it. We're not talking about a habit. And what ends up happening is it's very much like an inhaler or nebulizer when you bring it directly into the lungs. And if you want to see an asthma attack be brought to an end very quickly, this works. I mean, as counterintuitive as that sounds, with all that we've heard about how bad smoke is, and it is, in this instance, it can be very helpful. So this is firsthand. I have watched this happen. So I can only relate what I have seen more than once, and that's not going to be for everybody. Not everyone is going to want to take that chance. They don't want to risk it, and that's fine. Whatever you're comfortable doing is fine. I don't see it as a risk, but because we've kind of had that message drilled home, I know that's going to be in a lot of people's minds. So those are 2 herbs that I would look to for help with asthma attack. Some others for that same kind of situation, is called Mormon tea. And the thing is that this is a form of the herb ephedra. Now, I said earlier we're going to talk about epinephrine. Epinephrine and ephedrine as medications are very similar. And ephedrine is a chemical you can get from ephedra, the plant. Now, you may recall a number of years back, ephedra was all in the news. It was this horribly risky thing, and people, they had these cardiac events from it and so on and so forth. And that's true. That happened. And what happened was a weight loss company found out that, hey, if you have ephedrine, if you have ephedrine curbs the appetite, and it kind of keeps you going. So they used they put a mega dose in their product. And of course, geniuses that we are here in the U.S., if a little of something is good, more is better. So they took this weight loss product that already had a mega dose of ephedrine in it, and then of course they took way more than was indicated on the box. And, of course, people are going to have problems under that circumstance. Now, of course, there are some concerns there using it. I mean, yeah, if you have high blood pressure, you have to be careful using Mormon tea. But at the same time, it's more important that you be able to breathe, and you can probably deal with that high blood pressure later. That's my thought process on that. Mormon tea, it's a plant, it's ephedra. Now, all sales of products with ephedra in it have been banned by the FDA for our safety, of course. I'm eye rolling here. You can't see that, but just understand I'm giving a big eye roll. So for our safety, they've banned it. And instead of just banning like mega doses of it, they're going to ban the whole thing. Makes them feel good, makes them look like they're doing something. So while you can't buy products with ephedra in it, you can buy the plants and you can buy the seeds. So if you go on over to Amazon, or if you go over to Strictly Medicinal Seeds, you can find the seeds to grow the plants. And you also may have some wild growing near you. That's another thing. So that would be what I would look at for an acute attack. There are some other options also, because remember I said there's usually a two-pronged approach here for acute attacks and also reducing symptoms overall. So for that, there's a couple of options as well. There's Grindelia. There's a Grindelia species. You pick whichever one is, growing near you, grows in your region. And you can make a tincture out of this. We're talking about the aerial parts of Grindelia, which you may also know as a remedy for poison ivy. So multiple uses here. Very good plant to have around. If you don't have it growing near you, you might want to plant it because, even if you don't have asthma, poison ivy is pretty miserable. So this is one of those that is not good for, an acute attack, but it's better used on an ongoing basis to help reduce overall symptoms and help reduce the number of attacks. So this you could take in a tincture form. Something else you could take is Audionautix pilosa, and there you want the root of the plant. Again, you can take it as a tincture or as a capsule. That would probably be my preference flavor-wise, but then other things you might want to, those two I think would be good to have on hand to just sort of help reduce that overall. Another thing, there's another one I want to mention, is New England aster, or Aster novia Angliae, and this is an expectorant, and it is an antispasmodic. So it's similar to lobelia in that way, because lobelia is that, and so is mullein. It is the expectorants and antispasmodics, but it kind of falls somewhere in between using for an acute attack and acute attacks, and also for just reducing the number of attacks. So I would play it safe and put this in the New England aster belongs in the category of reducing overall symptoms. So something to be taking on a regular basis. Other things that you can do again for things like allergies. We can look at things like nettle. We can look at plants like ginkgo, because they are both sources of naturally occurring. My mind just went blank. Antihistamine. So nettle, stinging nettle. Granted, ginkgo is probably easier to harvest, but nettle is really well known for it. It works very effectively for it. But either way, you could also have other herbs on hand for asthma, like butterbur, which you might want to kind of limit to, let's say, a 2 to 3 week period, because it does have the pyrrolizine alkaloids that comfrey also has, and there's concerns about with that, with the liver and so on. If, let's say, you're just trying to get through a couple of weeks where there is a pollen that's in the air that's irritating you, absolutely use butterbur to help kind of calm those allergy symptoms down. We are at the end of the show. we're running out of time here. So next week I want to mention, I'm going to be talking all about yarrow. Yarrow is known as sort of the battlefield herb. It helps with stopping bleeding and so on. We're going to talk all about just one herb next week. And please, if you like what you've heard, connect with me by following me on Facebook, Twitter, G+, Pinterest. Don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please, check out herbalprepper.com. Check out all the classes that are there. I'm going to have an update on courses next week that you're going to want to hear. And I thank you all for spending your time with me. I hope you get something out of it. This has been Kat, the Herbal Prepper with Herbal Prepper Live. We'll see you again next week.